Welcome to Revline Racing's official podcast. Revline Racing is a professional simulated racing team focused on being as competitive as possible on iRacing. Primarily competing in the NASCAR iRacing series, Revline accomplished 29 wins, 15 pole awards, 83 top fives, and 5,248 laps led in the 2022 season. Hosted by Evan Locke and Ryan Crowfoot, our podcast will allow listeners to hear firsthand how we perform week to week, what plans we have for the coming week, and the opportunity to get to know our drivers through guest appearances. Thank you for listening. Enjoy. Welcome to the Revline Racing Podcast. I am Evan Locke, Revline's media manager and one of your podcast hosts. And with me is my co-host, Ryan Crowfoot, the owner and leader of Revline Racing.
So tonight's podcast is going to be a little different from previous podcasts. Normally we'd bring the guest in the second half of the episode, but tonight we're going to have one of our sponsors, Kyle Tate Voiceover. He's also the leader of our Asphalt Oval team, Kyle Tate. So he will be joining us for the whole episode rather than just the second half. We'll talk to him about the team performance to start things off, followed by a more in-depth look at Kyle Tate and his iRacing career and contributions to Revline Racing. So welcome, Kyle, and thank you for being here.
What's up, guys? I'm glad to be here.
I'm just interested to talk about your contributions to the team, including, if we're going to look at last week's Revline performance at the Circuit of Americas, we've got 3 pole awards, 2 wins, one of which was Jeffrey Bala, who's a new member on our team, and Mr. Kyle Tate himself, who just happens to be in the house tonight. We also had a total of 3 top 5s, 2 top 10s, and 66 laps led. So, Kyle, congratulations on the win. What do you feel made Revline successful last week at our first road course on the schedule?
Thanks, man. Yeah, this team has come so far from where we were a year ago on road courses. I feel like in 2022, if you had asked just about every driver on the team, we would have been like, we're oval guys. Some guys might skip the road courses. Some guys might do them, but just be okay at them. And I feel like just about every single guy on this team, including you, Evan, Ryan, you've been great on road courses, Josh Kanata. I feel like these guys have just put in the time, and it really started to pay off at COTA this past week. So it's been awesome to see, plus a newcomer in Jeffrey Bala. He got the win as well, like you said. So, man, we're not just an oval team anymore. It feels like we're mixing in the road courses as well, and we've got our fair share of talent on that side.
Yeah, as you've said, just how far we've come in a year is pretty astounding. And if you look at the practices and stuff, how we've conducted those and the improvements, from everybody's perspective as far as helping one another, having people hop in their car or their recording, of their review of watching them take a lap and, walking them through it and letting them follow somebody else around the track, showing somebody how you go around the track. And I know you were working with one of our drivers doing that exact thing. It's really nice to see that perspective and all of us working together and helping those that do struggle, because like you said, our focus is usually oval, and to be able to go from pretty much just strictly oval to road courses and then be able to encourage other people along the way to do the same, it's really nice to see.
Yeah, not only that, but to do it on a tough track like COTA. I mean, this is a highly technical track, heavy braking zones after long straightaways, and to do that for, how long was NIS? 36 laps? It's amazing to see the success that we had this past week. And quite frankly, Evan, you remember this last year. COTA is really where you and I started really, and I feel like this is kind of a microcosm of how Revline is as a team. But Evan and I last year for the COTA race in March just pushed each other. We were constantly posting times. We were constantly saying like, oh, I got you beat by 2/10. Oh, I got you beat by a second. And we were just going back and forth, and we were able to shave like 4 or 5 seconds off our times, get down to like the 2:16s last year. And this year we started running and we were already a second or two faster than we were the year before. And I just feel like that attitude is kind of what defines this team. We're always kind of pushing each other to get better and teaching each other how to, what breaking points, where to turn in. We're always looking for ways to shave that 100th, that 10th. And it's amazing just the friendly competition and the friendly support that goes on across the team.
And it's funny you mentioned last year too, because we had been talking earlier in the week, you and I, about those, 216 laps, and talking about how, we thought we were flying, man. We had the world by the horns, and then you look at this year and we're consistently running, 1 to 2 seconds quicker. I think some of my slowest laps were hitting, high 216s,
Yeah.
217s at, after the tires wore out and at the end of a fuel run and stuff. So, I think it's very indicative of how far the team as a whole has come, and because it's not just us, like we're the ones that have that story to tell, but across the whole broad spectrum of all the drivers, there was marked improvement this year in how the results tallied up.
And not only that, but it's not just the road courses that we're seeing that. I think week in and week out on the ovals, we're seeing it too. Every single week, there's somebody on this team that is having an outstanding week. I mean, I couldn't get it figured out a couple of weeks ago at Las Vegas, but you had guys like Josh Kanata and Jordan Schmeets that were just absolutely dominating those races every time they went out. And that's how it is every week. There's a guy on Revline that has mastered just about every course on the circuit, and that guy then becomes sort of the de facto sensei for that week, if you will, teaching the rest of the team how to get fast. And by the end of the week, you've got 3, 4, 5 guys that are dominating and going out and getting top fives or even wins in their NIS race.
Yeah,
So who do you think is going to be the guy to take charge this week as we head to Richmond then?
I don't know, but it's not going to be me. um, Richmond has just baffled me. I finished 7th there in the spring last year, and I think 13th maybe in the fall. And but I don't feel like I have the pace there. I don't feel like I can run up front. And if you're not qualifying up front, it's a track position race. It's really hard to pass there, and you've, especially with all the wrecks that are going to happen, it being a short track, I think it's going to be a little bit of luck sprinkled in as well, hoping that you pit at the right time and have the right strategy. So I don't know. It's a really tough track, and it's one that so far has betwixt me throughout my sim racing career.
Well, and actually, Ryan is usually a guy that I look to run pretty well here. Historically speaking, Ryan runs well at Richmond, so I'm excited to see what you can put together this week, bud.
yeah, I'm excited for this week. It's probably one of my favorite tracks. If not my favorite, it's up there for sure. I like Dover a lot too. Richmond last year, I won both the spring and fall, summer, whatever you want to call it, both races anyway. This week, I feel like I'm a little off. Don't Not really sure why. I felt off last night in the truck series even too, and I'm just struggling to find my groove this week, I guess.
Yeah,
Yeah, something feels different.
I feel like that was team wide too. I mean, this has always been a struggle for me on these flatter short tracks. Like here and Martinsville are the two tracks on the calendar that I just do not do well at. I do well at Bristol, but I like the high banking, and I finished 3rd there in the full length NIS race last fall. But these flatter tracks it's all about throttle control, right? And I guess I don't have any control.
Yeah.
um, yeah, it's tough, but we'll get there. It's just a matter of getting laps and getting track time, and eventually that light bulb will click on.
That's one thing with Richmond that if I was going to give a piece of advice to somebody struggling on the team, not necessarily you guys have been around pretty a while, but pretty long time. Maybe one of our newer guys that Jeff. I mean, blowing us out of the water, right? As far as our new guys, and pretty incredible. But if there was somebody new that hasn't had a lot of success at Richmond or is struggling at Richmond, I would probably give them this piece of advice. Hug the line the best you can all the way around, as far as the turns. Get down early, hug the line, don't drive off too early, just hug the line longer than you think you should, and that's going to save a lot of tire in the end and prevent you from sliding. It's too easy to slide up, and you just get those tires hot and burn them up too quick. And the other things, do your best to keep it clean and don't throttle hard on exit. Just let it kind of roll through the gear. And I like to shift. Some people don't. I find shifting controls your speed a little easier, and it helps you slow down and also drive in deeper. And I'd rather drive in a little deeper and then be slower off, which is kind of backwards logic from what you would think. You'd rather, most tracks you'd rather be easy in and then um, accelerate off early. But with how the turns and stuff work, it just for me feels a lot nicer to just drive in deeper and then be slower on exit. Where I think most people try to let up early and get a good run off. Where with these shorter straight stretches, it doesn't really matter as much. And you're not really going to pass anybody anyway on the straight stretch. You're more so looking for it in a turn, watching somebody, hoping somebody washes up or something like that. So I've always made my moves in turns, especially 1 and 2. It's really easy to get under people in 1 and 2 because everybody slides up. 3 and 4 is a little trickier, but I focus more on entry and driving in deeper and less on exit. So that would be my advice for Richmond. But Kyle, go ahead.
That's good stuff. Yeah, I mean, let's wrap up this interview so I can run some laps with that advice in mind. Quite frankly.
Yeah.
I'm
So
just kidding.
So with that first segment done, we're going to be taking a short ad break. When we come back, we'll be talking more about Kyle's iRacing career, his contributions to the team, and how those contributions played a key role in Revline's success so far.
Revline Racing's official podcast is brought to you by the following. Resurgence Apparel. Go to theresurgenceapparel.com for all of your apparel needs. Partnered with Champion Clothing, Casemate phone cases, and FlexFit hats. Before the Green and After the Checkers podcast. Found on all major podcast platforms. Kyle Tate voiceover and narration. For the ultimate source in turning your audiobook dreams into reality. Jerky Pro, the go-to snack choice for gamers and athletes. AIM Supplements. Aim above ordinary standards with simple, safe, high-quality nutrition products. Player One Coffee. Every bag roasted to order for maximum refreshness. Ma Energy. Get simple energy made just for you. Rex Pair, the ultimate tire puncture repair kit. All right, so we are back with our guest host. Sorry, can't speak tonight. Mr. Kyle Tate, who also does happen to be one of our team sponsors with Kyle Tate voiceover narration. Does fantastic work with audiobooks and sportscasting and things like that. We'll maybe get into some of that later as well. But he is one of the original Revline members, and he has been our asphalt team leader, specifically with ovals, since September of 2022, and a team member since February of 2022. So predominantly, much like most of us, runs NIS, has currently 24 career wins, 153 top fives, 34 pole awards, and has led over 1,500 laps. And last year, he finished third place in the NASCAR Class A Cup Series Championship. So no stranger to success in his personal life, or here on iRacing in the virtual world. So it's great to have you here, Kyle. Super pumped about this interview, actually.
iRacing is my personal life. I don't know why you made a distinction there.
Well, actually,
my personal life and iRacing, those are the same thing, right?
well, so it's interesting because I consider you to be a good friend of mine at this point, which is always an interesting part of the online gaming world anyway, right? You get to meet people online, and you've never actually seen them in person. But yet you have a pretty good bond. And so the other week I was traveling home from my parents' place, and I threw on a couple podcasts that you had been a part of previously. And I discovered that you've been viral before for a failed gender reveal, which was interesting to me. So
Okay,
when I do
to be
distinguish between virtual life and real life,
to be clear, it was not a failed gender reveal. Her gender was revealed. Okay, it was a girl. It didn't necessarily go as planned. So the story is my ex-wife. We did not divorce over the gender reveal. There were other reasons that we ended up divorced, but we were doing a baseball gender reveal. She tosses the pitch and I'm supposed to swing and hit it. And this was perfect for me because I was a big baseball guy. I used to work in baseball radio in the minor leagues, and her pitch was terrible. It was high inside. I mean, if I had swung, granted, I'm a radio guy for a reason, so if I had swung, I probably would have missed. And I did not realize that the ball was made of something that was going to explode on impact when it hit the ground, because a friend of mine had bought the ball and I hadn't even handled it, so I had no idea what it was made of. I thought I'd seen the video of the guy hitting it and it didn't explode, and he hit his wife in the face. And so I was thinking, okay, this is going to take a fairly hefty swing. So bad pitch. I'm not going to swing and miss. I'm just going to let it fall. And it ended up exploding at my feet. And it was all over Sports Center and Good Morning America and the Ellen DeGeneres show. I mean, you name it, any kind of talk show that would show something like that, I was on there. I mean, we were interviewed on Sports Center. We were interviewed on, gosh, I can't remember what else. It was everywhere. I was so tired. In fact, it's 5 years later. That little girl, Parker, is now 5 years old. And I still see it pop up on social media. I still have friends send it to me and say, hey, look what just popped up again. So it's, yeah, a great moment in the history of Kyle Tate.
Hey, at least it's sports history, right? Which is, what we're all about here with the iRacing as well.
The funny thing is the split between the people that thought it was a bad pitch and that I had a really good eye. I mean, there were people that said I had Joey Votto level plate discipline. And then there was a equally loud faction that said that it's a hit and run situation. I got to swing at everything, and that it wasn't that bad of a pitch. I should have just hit it. And so there were some that were on her side and some that were on my side. And it was just hilarious seeing the thousands of comments that rolled in on that video.
Well, to take this back to iRacing, because that is where we're at. Talk about having discipline and things like that with plate discipline and whatnot. One thing that I have learned from you I guess it's been over a year now that we've been teammates, and I guess about a year now since we've kind of formed this friendship that we have, is you are a student, not only of the car and of the track, but of technique and everything about it. So when it comes to you tackling something like a new track or a new car, do you have like a specific formula or game plan when you jump in something new, something that you're not comfortable with, where you pick up things? Like, do you have a game plan in mind when you go to a new track? Like, for example, when we're coming up to Chicago Street Course here in a few weeks, what is your go-to method for learning that track? Because you're very quick to pick things up. You're very much a student of the game in so many ways.
I think my game plan is just run as many laps as humanly possible, frankly. So while it seems like I may pick things up quickly, it's because I just put in a lot of time on the track. I study videos of people both in real life and in iRacing that are running. I try to emulate what they do. I try to emulate their braking points. And, so you're right. I think student is a good word to describe how I approach it. It's definitely, especially on road courses, something that I study, something that I'm constantly trying to find that extra tenth, that extra hundredth here and there. And then it's just a matter of seat time. I mean, the more you run, the more these tracks make sense. And this past week, for example, running at Circuit of the Americas, the things that I picked up there are going to help later in the season when we're running the Charlotte Roval and running the Indy Road Course. And, so everything that you pick up on in every track is going to help you at a future track. And, so I think just getting as many laps in as possible is step number one, and then studying other drivers and bouncing ideas off of people on your team. And that's step two, just trying to study what other people are doing who are faster than you and try to emulate them.
So as Evan said, you're a great student, but you're also a great leader too. And I couldn't imagine having a better any other person in the role that you're in as far as being our oval leader. You've done a great job. I appreciate all the effort you've put in. But like looking at last week at COTA, you're waiting, letting people follow you around COTA, trying to show them the ropes. what's your approach to teaching some of our newer drivers some techniques and stuff that you've learned over the course of the last year or so?
Yeah, I've always had a heart for teaching, whether that was in my broadcasting career or now in my audiobook career or in iRacing. And if somebody shows that they're willing to learn, I'm willing to take the time and sit down with them and say, this is what I do. Let's try to figure out how that can work for you. And so, I just want people who are willing, and I feel like every single name on this Revline team is ready and willing to learn from somebody who is going to put in the time with them. So, it's just a matter. And on top of that, too, I feel like the people who do the teaching one week are just as willing the next week to be the learner when somebody is better than them. So we very easily switch roles from teacher to student to teacher again as needed on the team week in and week out. And I think that's an important thing. Anybody who's going to be a good teacher also has to be ready and willing to learn so that later on when somebody, is looking for that instruction, you can kind of pay it forward down the line. And I was taught by a lot of people in sim racing. I've been taught a lot by you two. And, just turning around and later on when there's somebody less experienced who needs that advice, you pass it along as well.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I agree. I think just the team atmosphere, right? I mean, we have a lot of people on this team that are really good teammates, and without that, we wouldn't be nearly as successful as we are. And so what do you look for as far as a good teammate?
I think that what we just talked about is number one, willingness to learn. It's somebody who comes in and isn't just like, I'm going to prove my spot on the team. I'm going to show everybody how it's done. I'm the best sim racer that Revline or iRacing has ever seen. I prefer a guy who's going to come in and be humble and say, where do I fit into this team? How can I pick up from the guys that are around me? How can I learn from them? Who's good? Who's particularly strong on the track that we're on this particular week? And they approach them and say, help. So that's number one. I found that the guys who seek out help rather than try to prove themselves are the ones who ultimately go further in their sim racing career, and they learn so much more. There's just this shallower, easier to summit learning curve because there just is a humility about them that they don't know everything. And yeah, I mean, that's priority number one, I think, for learning is being willing to receive from others.
So I will say too. Oh, sorry. No, go ahead, Ryan.
So another thing that we've talked about in past, the three of us together, we've focused a lot on personality as well, right? And being able to step aside from just the seriousness of driving the car and being able to lighten up and have some fun, doing some practice races and maybe racing hard like Evan and I tend to do every week and wrecking each other and being able to joke around with one another and blame it all on Evan like normal. But that's one thing we always really focused on though. Like when we were looking to recruit somebody or, if we had somebody reach out to us that was interested in joining the team, we've always had, the last 8 months or so, we've had limited spots, 10 driver max, excluding staff, and we've pretty much always been at that number. I mean, we fluctuated some in moving some people around that didn't fit right, or bumping people to staff roles or whatever the case. But personality was a huge impact towards the development of our team. And what personality wise did you look for in some of our drivers?
Well, ultimately, sim racing is fun, and I want guys that embody that. That don't just come in and, I mean, even guys in the Cup Series in real life, they've got to have some fun with what they're doing. I mean, there's a joy in racing. It's you have to find that joy, and it's not a business that we're running here necessarily. We're all just buddies getting together and learning how to race, learning how to be fast. And so we want guys that fit into that chemistry. And I feel like we've got an incredible group. Really since the beginning of Revline, even a couple of the guys that have left and moved on to bigger and better things. Like, I think that, like, there's just been this level of chemistry on the team that we all just really enjoy racing with each other. We all love, I mean, every week we get together and run a practice race on that week's NIS track on Mondays, and that's some of the most fun that I have in racing all week, even though it's not for anything. You know, if you win, you just get bragging rights on the team for that week. But, you know, this past week you had admins in the race throwing random EOL penalties to Evan because he said something ridiculous, or, you know, I'm not going to call anybody out, but Jermaine let that power go to his head that he had admin responsibilities there. But, you know, so it's just fun. It's just a bunch of guys getting together, cutting up, and turning left, and it's just a blast.
Yeah, and that's one thing. You look at practice this week in particular, and how it was going. Right, it wasn't as good as what we were hoping for. Right, as far as the setup and how the setup was reacting and stuff. Jordan put again a really good effort into the setup. It was doing very well, and then all of a sudden had issues, and that happens. And, you know, we all came together as a team and we worked together to try to figure out a solution. And I think we got something that is good enough to at least contend for some top fives. I'm not sure as far as wins, how that's going to go yet. I would like to see Friday, or well, for me, Friday night, how it's going to react in a racing environment. But you look at the situation, right? We were all kind of down because the car wasn't doing what we were hoping it was going to do. And to lighten the mood, we had some good fun, and we need to do that, right? And I'm glad that we can do that with the guys that we have without somebody getting upset or frustrated that we aren't, you know, taking things too serious or something like, or taking things serious enough, I should say. But also being able to say, okay, you know, we've had our fun. Let's try to focus on seeing what this setup can do too, and try to get some data for Jordan to be able to go off of, right? So
yeah. I mean, if you're having fun, the speed will come, and sometimes you're fast, and so it's going to be naturally fun. But you're right. This week we had a whole host of variables that were up against us, and so we had to find some kind of silver lining in this week's practice to kind of take the edge off and loosen up a little bit, and remember that even running at a track that I don't like very much at Richmond, it's fun. We're getting to race. I mean, how can you have a bad day when you're racing?
Well, we've seen Petty Kyle enough to know that sometimes you have a bad day while racing.
You had to bring out the nickname Petty Kyle, didn't you?
It's been what I live for this evening.
The number is fitting sometimes.
To be clear, I don't always have fun sim racing. I just need to sometimes look for that fun in places that are harder to find, because this thing can be frustrating sometimes, for sure. I think that Petty Kyle might make an appearance this week at Richmond, to be quite honest. We'll see how it goes, but it's a frustrating track when there's nowhere to pass and you got guys slamming into you going into turn one every lap.
Well, and I will say too, you know, looking for how your 2023 has been so far in NIS specifically, I would say that you're having a pretty good time, because right now you're sitting on 3 pole awards, which includes California Auto Club Speedway, Atlanta, which is your home track, and last week at Circuit of the Americas. So you got 3 poles, you got 2 wins at Phoenix and Circuit of the Americas. But this year's a statistic that really sticks out to me because you have led 172 laps in your NIS races, which is over 10% of your career laps led across the service. And so I think that's really telling the tale about, even though perhaps some of the results aren't where you want to be just yet, your laps led totals, man, are just through the roof. So you're running up front consistently. You've got 2 wins, and you're just like the rest of us. You beat yourself up over the bad results sometimes, but a lot of that's out of your control. So you've got to be having some fun with the statistics that you're putting up so far this season.
How many laps did you say I was leading?
172, which is, for the record, the most on Revline this year so far is 172.
You know, that's actually double the laps that I led all season last year. I led 88 total laps for the entire NIS season. And half of those were at Auto Club. I had 43 laps led. I just pulled up the spreadsheet. And yeah, so I mean, a lot of that this year is at Phoenix. We had a monster setup at Phoenix. Schmeets just crushed it that week. I mean, I was running up front all week with some really, really solid drivers every single split I ran. And so Phoenix was really good. Auto Club was really, really good as well. So yeah, I mean, we've just Atlanta sucks that they destroyed my home track, but you know, it is what it is. But you know, it's just been an awesome first couple of weeks, and now I just hope I can carry that momentum into a part of the season that I'm not really too confident with. I mean, I've talked about Richmond, but like Bristol Dirt next week, and then Martinsville right after, and then Talladega is always a crapshoot. I think the next track that I really feel like I have any kind of chops at is Dover, and that's 5 weeks from now. So I just hope I can pull out some good finishes the next couple of weeks. I don't think I'm going to be able to keep up the rip roaring pace that I've had the first couple of weeks of the season, but it's once we get into the summer, it'll be, I think, a little kinder to me and my style of racing.
So,
well, I think most of us are looking forward to Dover anyway, but I was going to mention something.
Well, so one thing, looking at Bristol Dirt, that's a pretty intimidating race, right? We're not really from that background as far as dirt, but one thing I'll say, I think we're in a pretty good position. We have some really talented guys that can race dirt. I think we're in a good position, like we were as far as road courses, where they were not our strong suit. We struggled a lot early on. I think the same with dirt. It's going to be a process, but I think we could get to the point where we're doing really well at this Bristol Dirt race. Will it happen next week? No, but it might be a starting point, right? So I am looking forward to the Bristol Dirt. I like running dirt, but it's a change, and I think that between myself, Kanata, Chris Norris was running really good. I'm sure somebody else, but I'm forgetting right now. But I think we have enough guys that can run pretty good at dirt. Looking at the times and stuff, I was running really, really fast. Norris was right with me, and Kanata was not far behind either. So I think we can help get guys to a competitive spot, and I think we could get them to the point where they could be contending for top fives even, because I don't think very many people are going to be very good next week.
I think it's going to be a really dangerous race.
Yeah, I think you're right about like you said, much like road courses, there are a few guys that are proficient at it, and then there are a whole bunch of guys that are the also-rans. And we just got to practice. We don't have to, the old saying, you don't have to be faster than the bear, you just have to be faster than the slowest guy. That's how it is at Bristol. We've just got to be faster than those slow guys and just be up there with the guys that are decent. And we could end up pulling a couple of good finishes out, but I got a lot of practice to get in before we get there for sure.
Yeah, and I think we'll be able to, just as far as the team's concerned, I think we have the right structure going in and knowledge going into Bristol, what lines to run, what gearing, that kind of stuff. I think we'll be able to put together something setup wise and training wise to be able to help guys that are not used to running dirt be able to come in and actually find some success right away, or some comfort, hopefully, at least, maybe not success, but some comfort right away, and realize that this is intimidating, but they can do it. And I think you're one of those, Tate. I think you have the patience and you're consistent enough. And dirt is one of those things you have to be consistent at. You have to hit those lines the same every single time. But you also have to know that, okay, I can go down to the bottom and run this lap, or run this turn down on the bottom and make a pass if I need to. Or, if I get blocked on the high line, take that bottom line. But making those consistent laps early on in practice, learning what lines you can run, are really important. And you're really, really good at that. And I think you'll do really good at dirt once you get past the intimidation factor.
Yeah, well, I hope you're right. I just got to turn my force feedback way down on dirt tracks, because otherwise my arms get really tired by the end of it. It feels like a workout sawing that wheel back and forth.
Yeah.
Well, between now and then, just keep picking up those books while you're reading them, right? Just do that lift.
They send those to me in PDF, Evan, so they're not very heavy.
Lift the Kindle, okay?
Well, anyway, that was a pretty good episode. I'm really glad you came on board and talked with us, Kyle. And I'm really glad you're here. So, going forward, as far as the team and stuff, do you have any sort of projects or um, ideas or anything like that that you're looking forward to seeing anything or whatnot?
I think just um, continuing to train up the team, not only in how to find speed, but how to tweak the setups to our liking. I mean, Jordan Schmeets does an incredible job as our lead setup builder. And the more guys that we have on the team that understand what's going on off the track in the garage, it's critical. I mean, I've learned so much. I think I've learned more in the garage area in the last year than I've learned actually on the track. And so I think just teaching more and more guys how to set up their own cars and find speed, or if it's too loose for them to tighten it up, or vice versa. That's one of the top priorities for me, is just bringing these guys up to speed, and getting everybody proficient in how to build these things.
Yeah, I agree with you. So that's going to conclude our episode tonight. Kyle, is there anything else you'd like to say? Thank you for being a sponsor of Revline, but also all the contributions you've made towards the team with being the leader of the Oval team. Um, yeah, I appreciate everything you've done. I couldn't think of a better person for the job. You're doing great. You're a great friend. I appreciate it. We don't always see eye to eye, and we need that contradicting, or not contradicting, but that opposing look to things, the different opinions. But I appreciate every
Me and Ryan
single.
fight like cats and dogs, man. We fight like cats and dogs.
Yeah, yeah. But every opinion you give, I consider strongly, and I appreciate everything you do. So
Yeah,
is there?
man, I really appreciate it. I will say I'm grateful that you recruited. In fact, I think that you recruited me and Evan from the same race at Dover, from the Xfinity cars, over 2 years ago now, I think, or no, a year and a half ago.
Yeah.
And you, me, and Evan were all running in the top five, which I never run the Xfinity cars. So the fact that you found me in that race is kind of a wonder. But man, ever since then, it's been so. I've had more fun in the last year and a half being part of Revline, in sim racing than I have my entire sim racing career. It's awesome being a part of this team and seeing these guys grow. So man, thanks so much, and I really enjoyed having the time to join you guys on the podcast.
Yeah, thank you, Kyle. Anything else you'd like to say? Any shout outs or anything like that? Anything about your business?
Well, first off, shout out to all the other sponsors. I mean, Jerky Pro and Casemate, and Before the Green After the Checkers podcast, hosted by one Evan Locke. All of our sponsors. It's awesome being a part of that team that support these cars week in and week out. And as far as my business goes, you can find any of my books on Audible. Just search for my name, Kyle Tate, and you'll find about 230 titles that I've narrated over the years. So when I'm not racing, that's what I'm doing. I'm reading books out loud, and it's a fun life. And being self-employed certainly has its benefits. Sim racing during the day being one of them, when I need a break from the booth. So yeah, man, it's a blast being a part of this team, and I'm really happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thank you.
Well, thanks again, guys, every one of you, for listening week in, week out. Really glad to have you along. Thanks again to Kyle Tate, not only for stopping in for the podcast and being our guest today, super glad to have him, but also for fulfilling his role really well as Oval Team leader, and his sponsorship role as well, with Kyle Tate voiceover narration, sponsors 2 cars here at Revline. So super excited about this podcast, just to have his voice over here and available for all of you guys to get to know him as well. Really looking forward to this week at Richmond, and this will be a week that'll really tell us how we overcome adversity and how we're doing on weeks where maybe we're not as confident. So looking forward to being back with you next week. Make sure to follow all of our socials at Revline Racing. We are on Twitter, we are on Instagram, and we are definitely on Facebook. So check all those out. keep updated on what we're doing and where we're going. And we're so glad to have you along for the ride. Make sure you stick with us. Thank you for listening to Revline Racing's official podcast. Tune in next week for the next episode.